Hello, this is Dr. Heather Lee, and this is a continued discussion about assessment. This is assessment part 2, and in the previous video we talked about alternative assessments, and now we're going to take just a few minutes to talk about grading, an issue that really people have many different opinions. And as a student yourself, I'm sure that you could tell me things that you feel are fair and unfair and appropriate related to grading. And we're going to talk about some of those topics. And we're going to fall short, though, of actually determining it in some situations what really is the right or wrong thing to do. Because there is a diversity of opinion, but I want you to hear different sides of the opinion, and then also hear what really should be non-negotiable, what should be the basics of grading. So, starting with a few principles. These are things that really, regardless of what kind of a grading system you have, these things should describe it. The first one is that grades should be criterion reference. That means they're based on standards, instead of norm referenced, where they're compared with others on a bell curve. Now, if scores are compared with other people on a bell curve, that means that there will always be a certain percentage who will pass, a certain percentage who will fail, and a large percentage who are in the middle. So as a teacher, if you are grading maybe some projects that students did, and you say, okay, these are the best ones, I'll put them on this end. These are the worst ones, I'll put them on this end. And then in the middle, those will be my B's and C's. I'll give these good ones A's, and I'll give these less than good ones, C minus D, that kind of thing. That is norm referencing, where you're comparing them to others. But really, typical grading in a classroom should be criterion referenced. That means that everybody could get an A if they do exactly what you asked them to do. In other words, if you had given them criteria, here's what you need to do to earn an A, and they meet the criteria. And likewise, everybody should also be able to fail on a criterion referenced grading scale. In a norm reference grading scale, that would really be impossible for everybody to fail. What would happen instead is that the teacher would backpedal and say, oh, okay, I need to lower my expectations here. I'll make this be the passing grade. So typical grading should be criterion reference. Now, there are times when norm referencing is important, like in standardized testing. One of the purpose of standardized testing is to compare the results with other peers, with other grade levels, with other schools, with other states. So norm referencing does have a role in certain types of testing situations. Also, however it is that you grade, your policies and your procedures should be clear. This should be something that's written either as part of your school policy that you're following and you tell the students about very early in the school year, and also make sure the parents are aware of. Or if you have your own policy, it should be something that at the beginning of the year goes home in a back to school letter and is explained to all of the students. Could be something that students and parents have to sign off on. But it should be clear to them how you're going to grade them. And then you also should include a variety of types of assessment. Now notice it doesn't say pre-assessment. Pre-assessment should not typically be counted as part of your grade. But some of the formative assessment that you do, and certainly the summative assessment, and a variety of types of summative assessment, not just a test, but also projects or presentations or speeches. Those things should all count together towards a grade. There shouldn't be one thing that is so detrimental that, now it could be if you don't do that one thing you would fail, but that one thing that takes up so much of the grading that it's almost like nothing else matters. You do want to have a variety of things leading towards a grade. And then one important question to ask yourself about grading is this fair, the grade that the students got, and is it accurate? Does it really show how much the students have learned? And if you don't think the answer is yes, then go back to the grading and think about that. How could I change my expectations? How could I change the rubric I'm using? What could I do to make sure that this is a more accurate representation or is more fair to the students? Now, grades are something that bring a lot of anxiety to a lot of students, and I'm not sure about you, whether when you're going to get a grade back? Is this something that makes you nervous? Are you nervous to take tests? Do you think about grades a lot, or do you really not care? I mean, students are across the board in this area, but there is a certain percentage of students who will worry about grades, and who will worry really more than is healthy. And they're not focused on the learning, they're focused on the grade they're going to get. So a few tips that could help to decrease that anxiety. First one, don't keep talking about grades all the time. If you always talk about grades, then that implies that you think the grades are the most important thing. And really, it's learning that's the most important thing. It's character development is more important than grades. There's a host of things that are more important about grades, but we teachers tend to talk quite a bit about them. So talk less about grades, talk more about learning. It's also not a very good idea to post the best grades in the class. And I know why some people do that and reasons behind that, but it's really not a good idea. Remember that your students are very diverse. Not everyone is going to get an A. And do you want them to feel badly about that? You know, do you want to say that those that made an A are better in some ways than those who didn't make an A? Will that cause types of competition and possibly cheating that you don't want because you're highlighting those best grades? You want everybody to be validated and everybody to be encouraged to do better than they did the last time, not to compare themselves to other people and other people's gifts and capabilities. Along those same lines, acknowledge everyone who tries to achieve. Maybe they didn't get an A, but maybe they put in a huge amount of effort. And they should be noted for that. They should be appreciated and acknowledged for those kind of things. Talk about learning. Talk about the joy of learning. How it feels good to just give yourself to an assignment, to really learn something new that you didn't know before. And that God designed our brains to enjoy this. Now you may or may not be able to say it in those words, but learning is a good thing and it feels good, and students should make that connection that it's a good thing. And you may have some other ideas to add. Possibly if you're a person with great anxiety and you know, you think about grades a lot, you may have already identified some things that teachers can or cannot do, and you're welcome to share those with us. That would help to decrease the grade anxiety. So with that, I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about some decisions that you will need to make as a teacher someday. Now, some of these decisions may be made for you. The school might have policies, or your department, or your grade level, but these are some things that you should think through. One of those, starting in the top left here, is should English, like grammar and spelling, count towards the grade in subjects that aren't English? And some people might say, no way, this is history class, let me grade history. And if someone is a poor English student, I don't want them to be discouraged in history. I want them to succeed in this. And so they would say no. And other people would say, well, you know, English is important in every subject matter. It has to do with every subject matter. And it also involves, it makes this interdisciplinary learning, and I'm helping to support the English teacher, and it will develop their good writing habits no matter whether they turn out to be a mathematician or a historian or a writer. So there are different sides to that, and you probably know that I fall on the yes, it should count, but I also agree that there should be a limit, and it should not count more than probably 10% of the grade overall. Going around the circle clockwise, another question is, should late work affect the grade? And if so, how much? And I think most teachers would say, yes, it should affect the grade, but you need to think about, you know, what is my late work policy? And am I going to consistently enforce that? When are times when I should give exceptions? When shouldn't I give exceptions? And some late work policies are very, very strict, you know. 1 day late, 50% off the grade. 2 days late, a 0. It can be that strict. Or it could be 10 points a day, and that would allow them up to 10 days late, those kind of things. And then you also need to think about a 0. Now again, your school might have a policy on this, but a 0, it makes sense to average in a 0 if that's what the student earned. If they didn't turn in the project at all, it seems like you should just put a 0. But those zeros can severely impact a grade. It could it could have a student fail, and they may not be able to bring back up that grade no matter what they do, depending on the weight of that assignment. So that's something to talk with other teachers about, and clarify, do you put zeros in there? And then how are you going to structure a late policy that really encourages your students to get work done and to get it in? Continuing clockwise, cheating certainly may come up in your classroom. I say certainly may, but it's something that you should think about as a teacher. Think about how might cheating come up in whatever type of assignment you give, and what can I do as a teacher to prevent cheating. There's some things you should do, but also to talk with your students about that and help them to really own their own work. And then, how do I deal with cheating if and when it happens? Be prepared, visualize it, walk through the process, and know what your school's policy is for sure. Because the last thing you want to do is do something or threaten something or give someone a zero, and then you find out you're not going to be supported by your administrator because you didn't follow the school policy. So think about cheating issues. And then finally, the last one, should behavior, participation, and or tardiness or attendance count towards the grade? And some people would say yes. It gives my students a focus. It lets them know that when they're in class, I expect them to behave and participate. And if I didn't count off for that, then really my students would have no incentive to act well, to come to class on time and those kind of things. Yet some people would say, you know what, I understand that we want them to behave, but that behavior technically has nothing to do with their math achievement. And a student might end up with a C in class, but they actually have excellent math achievement. It's just that their behavior was poor, participation, attendance was poor. Do you really want that to be reflected in their math grade? And so those are just a few of the things. There are many, many controversial issues in grading. But you should take the time to think through those things because trust me, you want to have thought it through before you run into a situation with a parent who's upset with you, a student who is asking you about it, and you want to be ready to defend your grading system in a way that makes sense. All right, thank you very much. Have a great day.